Now, so gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. I am so grateful to have you on here. Could you just introduce yourselves one by one, and then we get started. Starting with Peter.
Okay, first. Hi, I'm Peter Skinner. I'm writer, director, and editor. Grew up in Sydney. I went to Waverley, actually. I think you went to Waverley, right?
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Went to Waverley. Left in 06, so I'm probably a bit older than you. But I went through art school, film school, working in the industry, and now I've come to being a writer, director, emerging into the film industry, I guess.
And Michael?
Hello, I'm Michael Sheasby. Pete, you got a rad list there, bro.
You got more than me.
I'm just an actor.
Work with Mel Gibson and Jennifer Kent. And
oh god.
Nominated for an actor award. And...
Yeah, man. Just actor. That's the thing. Pete's the one with all the different categories behind him.
I mean, you say that, and you're an extremely modest guy coming off here, but one of the main reasons why I sort of wanted to get you both on was purely because of the short film you were both on, Lost Boy, and I, sort of got a sneak preview of that, and for me, it was just really an astoundingly Australian film, which I really enjoyed, because I don't think there's a lot of I haven't seen a lot of really accurate representations of, drama within, the Australian sphere within modern times now, especially within, the youth in Australia. But Michael, your performance in that to me was, incredible. I first watched it and I was like, fuck this guy, like he's not good. And then upon the second watch and the third watch, I was like, okay, no, this guy's legit. And had to get you on. Peter, your writing and the way you use your jumping in timelines just perfectly depicts the whole story without me giving too much away, of course. But just that was the main reason why I wanted to get you guys on, to sort of delve through that. And actors and directors, I find, are the most fun people to talk to about life and how to sort it all out and what we're all doing wrong. So just to start us off, on a light note, what are you both grateful for at this moment?
You go first, Mike.
I'm grateful for what you just said, man. That was lovely.
Cheers, bro.
No, I agree. I think, when you sent out your pre kind of conversation, list of stuff, and you mentioned that Mike and I are successful, when I read that, I was like, sat next to my girlfriend, and I was like, what? I'm successful? And it's just like, you never think you're doing things that deem yourself successful until someone else tells you that. And you're like, well, I used to be the same. I used to be like, oh, I want to talk to people like that. And then you don't realize that you eventually maybe become that, and then you never think you are there. So I'm kind of grateful that someone perhaps sees me in that sense.
Oh, I mean, I've got my own little, group of actor and director mates. So we try and make our own short films as well. Obviously not to the standard of you guys, but I got passed on your work through a mate of mine, and he was like, Peter Skinner's fucking hot shit. I would do anything you're doing. So yeah, no, you guys are definitely there for sure.
I think so.
But just going into the, why we all love sort of telling stories, my lust for making films and telling stories and human connection as an actor really stemmed from my inability as a child to grasp the certain malevolence in the world, and, why people do bad things and why people do good things, and try to understand them better so that maybe I could stop them from doing bad things. I'd love for both of you to give me a bit of insight on what your love, how your love started for storytelling within your different, crafts. Peter first.
I think I was thinking about this question. I think it's a similar one to you. I think I've kind of gone into storytelling and art making, and I think it's to understand myself. I think most of my work is very personal, and it comes from a very personal place, but I think it's the idea of sharing my attempt to understand myself with other people and perhaps connect with someone else who feels the same way. So I think it's about not feeling as alone in the feelings you feel. But I guess it probably stems from a real kind of selfish one of just trying to understand myself. And if I can find other people that feel the same way, then it gives me a better understanding of everyone.
Well, yeah, that's definitely something that I can resonate with as well. Do you remember a certain age when you were like, okay, this is like I want to understand myself or the world around me a little bit better through this avenue?
Well, when I left high school, I was never really academic. I never really did well in school. And then I went to art school, and for some reason, I wanted to become a sculptor. That eventually ended up going through academics and getting interested in writing and interested in films. That made me end up in filmmaking. But I think I can't really pinpoint a moment. It was more so a progression of just small choices along the way. But there was one time I played basketball. I was actually captain of Sydney Uni basketball for so many years, and I ended up going to uni games and having this conversation. We ran around the circle with all my team, like, "Oh, what do you want to do with your life?" And in that moment, I was like, "Oh, I want to be a filmmaker." And this is before I even left art school. Wow. I didn't even know why I said it. I kind of had always been interested in film, but then here I am now, 5 years, 10 years later. So I guess if there was one moment, it would probably be that, but I don't necessarily know where that came from or why it came up at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've seen for me as well, it's at times it's been the conscious motivation has been there, but as I go further and further within my career, I start to unravel the subconscious ties from like back into my past and things like that. And that sounds like something that's sort of, like for you just to say that randomly to your mates is, pretty sounds like something from the subconscious. And that's like, yeah, that's really fucking cool.
No, exactly.
Mike.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Pete. I grew up in Africa, man. And I had a big garden and a bunch of vervet monkeys to chase. And
South Africa, that correct?
Yeah. Pietermaritzburg, which is kind of between the ocean and the Drakensberg mountain ranges. And yeah, like as a kid, my school uniform was like these khaki kind of park sport rangers kind of outfit.
Yeah.
And yeah, every day I'd just come home, run around the backyard, make a fire, and just play dress up games. And so it was all kind of just a fun adventure kind of thing. But then when I got to immigrated to Australia, I was about 12, I think around 13, 14, just, kind of normal teenage angst, but started to get really, I think I just lost my voice around that time. And then at 15, had a pretty incredible teacher, pretty like world-class director, just happened to, he had a kid and just needed a job. So for a few years, just happened to teach at that school at that time. And he just handed me some Shakespeare. And I remember just feeling like, I can say these things that I can't necessarily be articulate about in my everyday life. And then I think there was another kind of shift probably around the drama school times, because up until that point, everything had been kind of, the doors were just like, it kind of, I know it sounds cliche, but it kind of chose me, and I wasn't kind of the one
pursuing it per se.
Yeah. I wasn't kind of consciously, actively going after it. So I think it was around drama school, probably just after working with people like Elizabeth Kemp, who I think that's when I really started to understand the idea of that there was actually a bit more meaning in it for me. That I think starting to actually, really, to what you said, Pete, about just the connecting with the loneliness, and I think for me, just the hole in the heart that will never be filled, and everyone's just trying to do that, and it made me realize that maybe this isn't just fun and games. Maybe there's actually something that's a bit more beautiful about this. So yeah.
Right, interesting. So for you, it sort of started off as this in South Africa, as you say, and that's super cool because I've actually got family in South Africa.
Oh, awesome, man! Whereabouts?
Johannesburg.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, in South Africa, it started off as this play thing where you just sort of, you got to live out your imagination within real life, and it was just something to do that was fun. And as you then, ventured to, a big change within coming to Sydney, correct?
Yeah.
Obviously a lot, and especially within that, on the bridge of puberty stage, that would have been like a very harsh change for you, right?
It was, bro. It was.
Never recovered.
But I'm interested in your teacher handing you some Shakespeare, because often, I'm imagining you're around 15, 16 at the time. And often when we first get Shakespeare, I'm certainly, ashamedly like this, it sort of doesn't click. And then I'm like, well, what's the point of it? What's the point of all of it? And you sort of, have a bit of, just not really feeling it per se. But is Shakespeare something you really latched onto from the start, or?
Oh man, not necessarily. I just remember Damien Ryan was the teacher, who's really, really incredible. But I remember he was asking me to read a monologue, and I finished it, and he was like, "So, Mike, what do you think? What do you think that's about?" And I looked at him and I was like, "I have no fucking idea." And he was like, "Really?" Because it sounded like you understood everything.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think this is a reflection of kind of where I'm at right now in terms of the work that I want to do and the people that I want to work with. And it certainly just all boils down to writing. But I think when things aren't fucking clear, I struggle.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm expending my time, my effort, my energy on shit which just hasn't been quite thought about. It hasn't been thought through. There isn't a unity in all the kind of forms coming together for this, pure glass of water. It's like this ugly kind of milkshake. And I think that's exactly what Shakespeare is, man. Shakespeare is just a glass of water, same as Tom Stoppard. It's a glass of water. And that's why, reading a script like something written by Jennifer Kent or certainly Pete, it's just like, it's just a breath of fresh air, Right. It's just so simple and so clear. I'm like, there you go. That's all someone needed to do. It's just write great shit.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of, it takes out the ambiguity of what your job is and what you're meant to do, and how you're meant to portray it within within the constraints that you have. But in like the relationship between you two, like the relationship between director and lead actor is often, a very close, it can be a very close and personal one, sometimes not so much, right? But it often, especially within writer directors and lead actors, it incurs like a high level of openness. And I'm just wondering for you, Peter, and then Michael, what made you realize you wanted to work with Michael more than once?
I think I always thought about, what is the process of my writing and how do I translate what I'm thinking and saying into words, then I hand over to a team and actors and stuff. But to go back to your question, then I guess when I first met Mike, I met him through, I was making a short film called Brother, which was really early on with Joel Jackson, the guy from Stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted someone and we couldn't get him. So they're like, oh, let's open it up and see what else we can get. And then someone, I think Joel just showed me, oh, this Mike Sheasby guy. I ended up checking out his self-tape of him not even talking, just looking in a mirror, and then he kind of hits himself in the face. Standard Saturday night for Mike. And then he, I was like, I don't know, there's something about it. A lot of self-tapes you see the actor is trying to do something to show that they're an actor and they can say the words. And I find that Mike just to stand there and look at himself and then react to that image of himself. And I don't know, something clicked to me that I was like, oh, that's the person I want to work with. So we ended up casting him, and he thankfully did it, because I remember sitting down in my parents' living room with a bunch of actors. It's kind of the first film that I had made after film school, and that was the first kind of film I was trying to make properly, because before I didn't know what I was doing. And we went around the table and everyone was like, oh yeah, the script's great, it's working, blah, blah, blah. And then Mike was just like he just said, he's like, I just don't get it. I don't get the ending. And I was like, oh, fuck, this guy they've just brought in, he's kind of the extra, came in later, and now he's telling me it doesn't work in front of everyone. What am I going to do? My parents are in the kitchen, like listening on. And I'm like, oh no. And then I realized in that moment that it's very rare to get someone to actually speak up, especially to a director in front of other people, that it doesn't work. And when he said that to me, I was like, oh, he's right. And I knew that. I didn't know how to get it right yet, but I knew in some way the ending didn't work. And that film never has been released, and the ending may not work, but I'll probably release it one day. But I don't know, since then, we went outside after that and everyone else went home, and Mike and I stood in my driveway, my parents' driveway, for like 2 hours talking about the assassination of Jesse James and how it's the greatest film ever made. And it just clicked, and I don't know, and ever since then, it's just, if you can have someone on face value that just says to you, hey, I respect what you're doing, but it necessarily isn't as good as it can be, or it doesn't work. He said that to me the first time I meet him. I'm like, holy shit. And then that's just evolved ever since. And I think that honesty and that trust, and obviously trust gets built, but his honesty and respect for the craft up front made me think, wow, this is someone I want to work with. And it's just evolved to get better and better ever since. And I always think when I write scripts now that I give them to people to read for feedback, but the best feedback I normally get from one person is probably Mike, because A, I'm probably writing it for him, but B, because he will give me emotional continuity if this makes sense or not. Where a lot of people will give you like, oh, this plot didn't make sense. Or he'll be like, no, like, I felt that. I wasn't sure why this happens, but then I felt this, and this. And then just kind of filtering out the noise of, what feedback can be, and then putting it through into emotions. That's kind of what I then take my craft to think what the emotion is doing and how I put that back into words. But to answer your question, why do I keep working with him? Because he just makes it so easy for me, because it's so hard. It's so hard to do normally.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think in there, the interesting thing I heard in there was you had all your actors in your lounge room. And I think, as in my experience, and I've certainly been, this guy in getting cast in something and talking to the director about the scripts, and often sometimes you'll just go into people pleasing mode, because obviously there aren't many jobs. And it's very easy to do that, certainly for me. But it's, at what price, at what value do you want your word to be? Because if you constantly just people pleasing, like, yeah, that's good, then whatever you say, if you're like Mr. Nice going like, yeah, that's great, your word means nothing, right? Whereas if you're constantly honest, like Mike, and this is my follow-up question, where do you get the balls to just sort of speak up like that? And I know you previously said that you really want to get something if you're doing it, but were you always like that? Was there a certain time where you jumped into like, no, I'm actually gonna speak up now? I'm interested to hear that.
Man, you raise such an important point, bro, with the whole supply and demand thing, and the oversupply breeds. Liz Chantry talks a lot about this, that oversupply breeds likeness. And when you've got a whole bunch of people just just, tearing at each other just so that they can get an opportunity to work for free on something, just on, some student experimental short film, which is unpaid. And like, it is just so, for me personally, I found it so fucking hard. Like many actors, to be able to speak up and speak your truth. And like, hearing you say that's so interesting, because I'm like, yeah, like what is that point? Man, I truly think it's just fucking exhaustion. Yeah. I truly do. I think it is enough rejection. It is enough just the no's and the no's and the no's, and it just gets to a point where it's like, I don't care anymore. I like it. I think in doing that, this is why I love that whole idea of exhaustion. Like, I don't have the fucking energy anymore to put on a polite smile and to nod my head, even though I'm deeply, deeply sad internally with this whole kind of scenario. And it when it gets to that point, there's like this beautiful cathartic place on the other side where it's like, oh man, like, I'm just going to focus on what's important. And what's important right now is understanding that fucking line, and I don't. So I need to ask this person, what does this mean? And it just, it goes from this place of like, where so much of my time and effort and energy is spent on people pleasing. And then there's, just can't do it anymore. And it gets to this other place of back to that glass of water. It's like, there's just this simple place where there's two people here. Someone's written some words and I have to put on, dress ups and pretend that they're real. And I just need to ask a question. So how does this work? And, to Pete's credit, oh man, I've said this about Pete before. So, but it absolutely one of the best directors I've ever worked with, and certainly up there with my experiences with Jennifer Kent and Mel Gibson, where there's no time and energy and effort left for what's that word? Superlative. Frank said it different.
Who was right?
A superfluous shit.
There we go.
It's like we're just here and we are just focused on what's important, and everything is so clear and everything is so honest and everything is so easy. I remember Mel Gibson just saying to me, he was like, Mike, you could see him just get like a little bit frustrated. And then he was like, okay, what you're doing is great, but it's not what I want. And I was like, that's the easiest fucking direction I've ever heard in my life. Like, whereas someone who wouldn't have that kind of self-confidence and self-trust would kind of come up with all this, shit to say in this moment.
You just like,
yeah, exactly. And it's, that's the thing that, that's so wonderful about Pete as well, is like, Pete, do you remember in Brother, when I think it was day one, and it was
like 2015, right?
Yeah, it's 2015. But I was in the car, which was parked outside of the garage.
Yep.
And I remember I did a take, and then you like walked out and you just like gave me the thumbs up and you just looked at me. Oh, I think you came up to the window and you were like, yeah. And then you walked away, and I was like, man, it's like, that's a fucking director. Like, he just,
no more, no less.
He trusts himself enough that because he's done the work, he trusts himself enough to just get out of the way. And I think that takes a lot.
That's what isn't that what I was saying before about you speaking up in the room? And obviously there's a way to say it. Like, if you're an honest emotionally honest person, you're not attacking someone saying this doesn't work. You're saying, I don't understand this. I don't know the answer, but let's find the answer. And if you phrase it that way as an actor to a director or a writer, the knock-on effect of that is we're not just blankling over saying it does work when it doesn't, and then everything else will just, fall apart as we go on. Because at the start, it's like, we need to work on this. Then you work it out. Then when you get into rehearsals, you talk about it. And then when you get on set, you know what you're doing. And then when you're filming it, you've already had the conversation around, does it work or not? And now it's about exploring it. And then when the actor gets it right, all it has to be is a look saying, that's right, let's move on. But if Mike didn't speak up early on and I wasn't at this level I was at now to realize that writing doesn't work, I get frustrated in the moment going, why doesn't this work on set? And then I go up to Mike and I'm like, hey, Mike, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's just try, think about your childhood. Let's try that. And then you walk back and then he doesn't necessarily get, because you're trying to fix a problem that's already an issue from the writing, and the writing isn't going to get any easier on set if it's bad. So yeah, I think it's the easiest thing to do as a director is to say nothing when you know the work has been done already and it's as close to right as possible. If the writing isn't there, then that's when the director has to wrestle with it to try and find something. And that's my fear, is to ever be in that circumstance, because that would be the worst place to be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of, obviously you've done really well in getting Michael for all your films, because I'm just gonna note out here on the one of the the climactic scene within Lost Boy, just the writing, first of all, fucking phenomenal, Peter. Like
Thanks, man.
I was just like, okay, it's just a lot of people within those scenes and a lot of writers and a lot of directors will just slam it with so much dialogue, a lot more than it actually needs. But I think you've created such a beautiful atmosphere for Michael to really show off his ability to, have such beautiful nuances between the lines. And that's my favorite things to watch as, an actor and a lover of film, is the work in between the lines. And Michael, yeah, how do you do it? What's the
No, you bring up such an interesting, a really important point, man, with the whole, Pete building the atmosphere, because I think a strength of, you think of what are directors' strengths, and you think they're able to, give that right note at that right time. And, but there is a whole nother side to this where there are hardcore logistics that need to be taken care of. And I think that's what Pete is a beast at. And so when it comes to, the main conversation in that short film, that all happens because Pete is so on top of it with logistics that we get a full day. Well, I get a full day with Ben Oxenbould opposite me, and great text in front of me, and everything's set up, and it's a studio, and we just get to play for an entire day. That's the whole other side to this, is organizing time, building the atmosphere on set where there's no, people walking in and out and phones going off. And Pete builds an atmosphere which is so catered towards actors that I think it's really important to acknowledge that, especially for up and coming directors, where it's I want to do all this amazing shit, and then at the end of the day it's well, you got 45 minutes for it. So try get great work from those two actors, with all their coverage taken care of in 45 minutes.
I work as a first AD, and I did a lot of first ADing at AACTA, where I went to film school. And I've given a few classes there recently, and taught a few classes on this idea of, they bring me as a first AD to talk to students, and especially directors, about running a set and how a set should be run. And I make the point, probably I say once every 3 minutes, the idea of you should focus on quality over quantity, and that should filter through every step of filmmaking. And so when you're in the logistics stage of writing, like think about how you can make this the most contained, quality-driven film you possibly can, that gets straight to the heart of what you're trying to do, but at the same time explore a theme and an idea and characters and make it feel big. I think if you can be more specific about what you're doing in the writing stage, you can be, it will seem bigger on screen than it is. So then you take the script you have and it's like, you know, as condensed and as refined as possible, and then you explore that into your logistics of structuring your, you know, your schedule and your budget and your time. And you put a lot of time, in my opinion, you put so much time into rehearsals. And I think if you can bring all that, you know, and then bring a crew that you crew as specifically as you cast your cast. So everyone in your crew should be looked at very specifically about, are they right for this role? And it's easier, if, obviously, if you can pick people. If you have to beg people when you're younger and stuff, you kind of do get who you can get. But all of it builds up to on the day. And there's a great, like, I think there's an interview with David Fincher, and he's like, you have all this money that goes into writing a script, developing the team, the crew, the locations, the sets, the clothing, the design, the makeup, the wardrobe. And then the idea of it is to get through it as fast as possible. Like, it doesn't make any sense to him. He's we're here to do a job. And then you think that we get here, then we have to rush through it. Like, no, like, so when it comes to scheduling, it's about the idea of like, how can we make the most amount of quality without having to think about it in a quantity sense? Like, yeah, like in that Lost Boys, a 3-day shoot, which is kind of crazy when you think about how big the film feels. But even like that, yeah, I was in a set with Mike and Ben Oxenbould. We had like 5 or 6 camera positions, and we're doing 10-minute takes of every single, you know, camera angle. And as an editor, because I edit my own work, like that's a dream, because you just have everything you want in every different angle, and you can kind of find it in the edit. But if you didn't have the time on set to get that, then I would be picking one take here, one take there, and that's all we get. And it might not be Mike's best take. So I think the idea of like, yeah, it's not really nice to hear Mike say that, but I think it's true. Like, you have to think about logistics as important as you're thinking about the, you know, what camera you're shooting on, or what lenses you're shooting on, and what actors you're getting, because it's like a holistic approach to making a film. The quality only comes if every step has quality built into it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one other thing that I've really enjoyed about the films that I've seen of yours is that, you know, I think a lot of student directors, you know, and in my first film, I was definitely fell into this category as trying to make these, you know, almost big feature film in like 10 minutes, rather than just a little slice of someone's life, which I think you have done so perfectly within, you know, this Lost Boy and then Stranger, as I've seen before. Still waiting to see Staring Contest, but hopefully I'll get to see it after this.
I'll send it to you.
Awesome. But yeah, and I think, you know, what you said on quality over quantity is so freeing as an actor. And I'm sure you feel that, Michael, because I mean, I can remember times I've been on set and, you know, we've got half an hour to get, you know, a 3-page scene with a 3-camera setup, and, you know, they're screaming and you haven't had any food and you haven't had this and you haven't had that. And they're like, you know, and you just have to keep going. But I mean, you know, creating a dream scenario as a, you know, for an actor, as a director is, I think, yeah, Michael's explained that you're extremely good at that. But Michael, was that the point where you realized you wanted to work with Peter on continuing projects? Was it just the writing, or was it once you saw him like, oh shit, that point in the when you talked about your story of being in the garage and him just going, yep? Or was there another specific point where you realized you're like, you know what, Peter, like, let's do some more shit together, man?
Like you're asking him, I think.
Yeah. What's that thing?
Like, Mike, please come and do this with me. I need you.
I mean, look, Brother was a lovely time where I was like, wow, man, I kind of just get to play here, and there's you know, young up and coming directors. Pete's older than me, by the way, but
not by much.
But like, yeah, he's a young director who's like just great. He's getting out of the way here, and that requires a lot, and that's fantastic. And like, I had a really great time, and And then we just, I think, we just started hanging out and realized that so much of what we were trying to do was in alignment with each other in terms of, the kind of caliber of work that we were both wanting to work towards, and what we wanted to give, what we wanted to contribute to the industry was certainly, there was a, a synergy there. There wasn't, oh yeah. Okay. So I was in New Zealand. So this is the story of Lost Boy, right? Because Pete had said, he had mentioned, like, I know he's doing his master's at AFTRS, and I know he's got this film, and he's like, hey man, we thinking of doing it. And I'm like, yeah, all good. Thinking that it was another kind of brother scenario, which was the first short film, and it was like, yeah, a couple of days, and I'll rock up, and we'll have a good time, and it's great. And I was in New Zealand working on a BBC show, and in my off time I was just playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2. Wow. But yeah, I remember Pete, like, there were a few kind of messages that came through where he's like, they were quite like, hey, just trying to confirm things here. And I was like, yeah, bro, it's all good. Like, little student short film kind of thing. And then eventually rocked up to Sydney. We had, a day or two. Oh, we had a couple of days of rehearsals and chatting with Ben Oxenbould. I mean, that guy had been a hero of mine for like a decade since I'd left drama school. So that was very awesome. And then rocked up, I think it was like 4:30 in the morning. We were doing that one long take. And I was about halfway through that take. So like, I've got, camera crew behind me following me into the RSL. I was about halfway through the first take of that, where I just got hit with this massive wave of like, whoa, the Pete has, this is so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. And I kind of got, just smacked with this reality check of like the caliber of work that or the professionalism and the way that Pete had grown over that time during his masters. Which, hearing me say that, I feel like a bit of an arrogant dick, but like, I just kind of ignorant, like I didn't realize it at the time, but it was pretty spectacular to be like, wow, Pete is, it was just so impressive to see the kind of the way that he had grown, the level of organization, and it was quite overwhelming.
Astounded by the professionalism.
Well, I remember being at home being like, I've written this script for Lost Boy for Mike Sheasby, and he's going to do it, right? And then he's often, doing BBC stuff in New Zealand, which in my position then, I was like, that's so much bigger than what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's going to do it, right? And then he has to do it. I've written it for him. He can't not do it. And then I was trying to contact him. He's playing Red Dead Redemption, and eventually he was like, yeah, I'm doing it. And I'm like, thank God. And yeah, I remember maybe I should have explained to Mike, it sounded bigger, but then I didn't know how to say that at the time. It was like, oh, this is actually a big production.
Yeah,
but
you almost can't say that without sounding a bit wanky, as it being like, it's a student film, but it is your master's film, right? Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like, what else can you say? Hey, Mike, we might be sending it to the Oscars one day. Like, I need you over here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, it's tough to rationalize that, I guess.
Which if I'm correct, I think I saw in your story the other day that it's qualified and you have sent it, right?
Yeah.
So
which is crazy. So we're
congrats on that, you two. That's fucking awesome.
Thanks, man. It's so strange that one of my friends messaged me the other day saying, "Hey, just take a moment, realize that you just sent your film to the Academy Awards."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, you're actually correct." And yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about it, where the films come from, and then you're eventually one day putting it on that level. But
for sure. And Pete, I'm just wondering, in your eyes, sort of like, obviously you've worked with Michael a lot, but I'm sure you've worked with a lot of other actors as well. And I remember you detailing that self-tape for me, and sort of you seeing a lot of actors, trying to be like, hey, I'm an actor, like you can, work with me, and Mike just sort of sitting there. I'd love to see that self-tape, by the way, if you guys can send it to me after. But but what intrigues you most about working with an actor? Is it the ability to speak up like Michael does? In terms of questioning the scripts, or is it something else that really grabs you, or is it sort of an esoteric thing that you can't really put your finger on?
I think it's hard to it's really hard, I think, to know that, and that's the $1 million question. Like, when you first of all, like, there's a great quote by Paul Thomas Anderson, who's like my idol hero. He's like, to be a good director to actors, you should be a good writer first. You don't have to be a writer director, but make sure the writing is good first. So talking through the process of like finding an actor and what I see and why I gravitate towards certain people. I'm kind of listing off a bunch of like different references, but like Elia Kazan, I think he says like the character has to be inside the actor somewhere. And I'm paraphrasing here, but like, I'm of the opinion that I'm in a lucky position where a lot of the actors I work with most of the time, I've met before or I know them. So like, I've met Mike, luckily, on Brother, so I could write Lost Boy for him and staring contest for him, and this feature I'm working on for him, and a TV show for him. That sounds ridiculous. You've been working for years, Mike, don't worry. And Ben Oxenbould I met as a runner. I was driving him on Wolf Creek. Alex Nell, who plays the Nicole in The Lost Boy, I knew her. I met her before. Joel Jackson I had met before. I knew him. I was friends with him. So like Troy Honeysett, the guy who plays Joe in Lost Boy, I knew him. Laura, the girl from Stone Contest, I knew her. So what I'm saying is, like, I meet these people, and it's I don't know, maybe it's the perceptive side of me that I see. I learn. I get to know them. I learn about them. And that's what kind of Elia Kazan says. He's like, he likes to hang out with the actors and talk to them about what they believe in and who they are and what they're like and what their passions are and what their sensibilities are like. So then when I'm writing, like I already see the character in them, but I can only see the in them if there's something of that character in me as well. So if we can link that like triangle up of the word on page, me and my feelings, and the actor and their feelings. There's a few times that Mike's come up to me and said, "Oh, how did you know this? Why did you write this? Like, did I tell you this?" And I'm like, "No, I've written that because that's how I feel about this thing." So if I was to work with actors that I hadn't known previously, someone like Georgie Parker in Stranger, she's just such an amazingly talented actor that I took I guess like in any situation, I took a punt on her to see if she'd be right for it, and obviously she would be, because she's an amazing actor and she's a great person in that role. But if I was looking for one thing in an actor, I think it's an emotional openness. But I have to know that if once they're open, that character is in there somewhere. And I think that's the point of good casting directors and good producers and good writers and directors who can find those actors who can play those roles. And it's nothing worse than seeing an actor playing a role that you just know they don't suit. And it just doesn't work. And it's not because they're a bad actor, it's because there's something in there that isn't connecting. And it's not at fault of anyone at the end of the day, but perhaps that person isn't right for that role. So if I had to answer your question in a simple way, what do I look for an actor when I want to work with them or cast them in a film? It's that connection to the character, a connection to me, and a connection to what we're trying to say. And if that comes out, that can come out in one conversation. That can come out in seeing Mike look at himself in the mirror. That can come out in watching someone else's work and know that they have that ability to get there. But at the end of the day, it's kind of some magical like guessing game. Like it may work, it may not, and then you hope it works. And then if you put the work in, it normally works out well if those choices are right.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting you label that trifecta of something in me, something in them, and then obviously they have to produce good work as well. But I'm really, that's really interesting in and that you see yourself reflected in them a little bit. And I find that really interesting, because it's definitely something I see within, well, obviously I don't know Paul Thomas Anderson, you know, in person, but what I love a lot of his work, as I'm sure you two do as well. And for me, that seems like, you know, very similar for you two. So you're on the right track.
Hoping to, but it's never like, it's not like a thing like, you know, just because I'm you know, a 30-year-old male growing up in Sydney, it can be anyone, you know, it can be literally anyone. It could be like a you know, a woman in Japan that I met, and I'm like, there's something in you that I feel is in me, and that's a universality of emotion that if you can bring that out in a character in a film, then that's what it is. It's nothing specifically, you know, surface. It's something deep inside people, and if you can find that, that's when it becomes good, I think.
Yeah, wicked. And Michael, as an actor, obviously the writing for you has to be number one, utmost important. But in terms of the characters that you play, do you get more excited for characters that you may find it easier to relate with, or characters that you will have to really stretch yourself to relate with and sort of portray truthfully?
Man, I think when I left drama school, like I went there young. I went there, you know, straight after high school. I was 18, so I graduated at 21. I left still definitely hanging on to this idea of like, oh, you know, I want to work on things which stretch me, and I want to play, you know, someone who's 10 years older than me and burns on the side of their face, and like I got so many fucking stupid audition stories where, like, man, I wasn't trying to bring any kind of I wasn't trying to do the work. I was just trying to show that I was doing the work. You know, I just wanted people to look at me going like, wow, there's an actor stretching themselves. And I think you know, talking about that kind of exhaustion thing again, yeah, it took me until about 25 where all that kind of showing and people pleasing, it just got you know, too exhausting, and I got to the point where I just had to kind of start again. And yeah, when I started to when I went through that moment, it just kind of look at it from a kind of, you know, blank canvas. I think that's when it was like, just stop the whole kind of charade, the whole drop the act. And I think this is where I kind of developed like almost this hatred of acting. Like when there's this kind of obvious kind of showing or pretending, or like I'm saying an acting line, it kind of sets off my OCD, because you know, for me, I think what is the most important thing is like there's this human being, and that it's real, and that they've, just like me, they've got a hole in the heart, and they're trying to fill it unsuccessfully, and they're going to spend their whole life trying to fill it, and they're never going to get there. And what was the question, bro?
That's so good. What do you find it easy to like portray characters that are closer to you or further away?
Oh yeah, so now so I left drama school and was like, yeah, it's all about stretching, growing, and now I just think it's so much about timing, man. I really do. I think it's so much about timing. Same as, you know, a lot of stuff in life. It's like this, you know, this thing kind of just came into my life at this particular time. And I mean, doing staring contest last year with Pete, that was, you know, he sent me the script and I was like, what the hell, man? What are you, what's going on? And yeah, it's just, I feel like the things which have brought me the most joy and the most kind of fulfillment. The jobs that I've done, which have done that, have been things where I've read, you know, the first page or first 2 pages and just kind of sat up and gone, like, did this person know? Like, what? Like, this is mine. This is for me. Like, I know exactly what to do with this, which does not happen a lot. So yeah, I think it's just a timing thing, man. I think it's
the timing thing is definitely an interesting perspective for me, because I think, you know, as actors, we're like, I mean, especially for me starting, I'm sort of, you know, 3 years in professionally, and I always say that with, like, you know, exclamation points, because, you know, that's just the first time I was got represented. But when I first started out, I'm like, yeah, everything right now, it's a perfect time, I'm ready. And now the more and more and more, like, I go without, you know, booking that big role, or you get closer and a callback and not booking it. I'm actually a little bit more grateful the longer I go, because it's like, oh, okay, I've got more time to, like, get better and sort of figure it out. And, you know, and obviously there's that bitterness that can, you know, really, really strive from not, you know, having those successes and early on, and really, I think it stems from me not being able to show people that, like, oh yeah, no, I've been in this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. But I think what I really relate with in terms of what you said is just seeing, you know, the truth within, you know, different acting. And recently I've seen certain, you know, performances where they're just saying an acting line, and it really fucking pisses me off. And then, like, it's just not truthful in the slightest. And obviously, you know, when I watched you in Lost Boy, I was like, okay, it was this mixed frustration and just happiness of, like, okay, this is someone who's, like, you know, I definitely want to model my performances off of. But what do you, as an actor, I think it's easy to really get trapped in, you know, the bitterness of having all that rejection and not letting resentment set in. Has there anything that you've, you know, attributed to really combating that resentment of, you know, oh, they're not picking me yet, or, you know, I don't know where my next bill is going to, you know, where my next paycheck is going to come from?
Yeah, 2 things. I've already forgotten the first one.
That's all good. You can start with the second, and I'm sure the first will come back.
No, now I forgot the second.
Really?
Sorry, bro. Can you repeat the question, man? Please.
So basically, as an actor, obviously as actors, we get a lot of resentment because, you know, we just get rejected.
Yep, got it. Sorry. Okay, first thing is that there's a quote, drinking resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And the second I heard that, I was like, this is back in 2015. I was like, man, I just felt like I was at a point where, like, my blood was just black. I felt like I was just, like, sad and all of there was so much focus on things that were out of my control. And I think that's just a recipe for for how not to find any bliss in life. The other thing, when I sat down and really kind of like took that concept literally of, okay, well, what can I control? I was like, I can get better. That's what I can do. What I can't do is I can't control casting directors' decisions, producers' decisions, what other people think, social media stuff. Like, there's so much stuff which I can't control. What I can control is getting better. And that just kind of, I think rekindled that fire for me, because the thing that I'd done since I was 14 was like, get that piece of paper with the dialogue on it and go work on it. That was the thing that I always felt like I was able to do from 14, and drama school was just that every day, all day for 3 years. And that was, end of 2015 was like, cool, say no to everything, and just go practice. Like, that's it. There's no excuses. Go to practice, and then for like joy, just go do jiu-jitsu. And that was it. And that was, Monday to Friday was just acting practice, whether it was class or whether it was people like colleagues I'd met in class and gone, cool, they're awesome, they're honest, they've got a great work ethic, and I just hop on my motorcycle and just go from reader's house to reader's house, and just be very clear about what I wanted to work on. And cool, I can only I'm okay getting there on the third take. I'm not okay at getting there on the first take, so just focus on that. And I'm annoyed because I'm still not able to kind of release on cue. Great, that's just what I'm working on today, etc. So it and that was just 2016 was man, I still look back at that as like the most enjoyable life. And I was sleeping on a wooden floor on a mattress, which every time it rained, because it was freaking an old building, the water would leak in, and I'd always wake up with like a wet mattress underneath. Like I didn't have any bedding. I just had a sleeping bag, and it was the most fulfilling year because I was just focusing on the work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a kind of big moment for me of like, well, that can become the safety here, is just focusing on, bringing it back to what is actually important, which is like putting my head on the pillow, feeling proud. And that's only going to happen if I feel like I'm actually contributing something of value. So, and that is within my control. I can go to class and I can practice. So yeah, I totally forgot the question again, man. Sorry.
That's. I think you answered it. I think you answered it perfectly, and that was you touched on jiu-jitsu a little bit, and I'm very interested to hear I'd love to hear from Peter first, and sort of how different disciplines have influenced your crafts at the moment. Obviously, Peter, you finished high school, went to Waverley College, represent, and
Mike went to, where'd you go? You went to Barker, didn't you?
I was Barker boy, yeah.
Were you Barker?
Yeah, for 6 years.
Right?
Yeah. I remember you guys had a guy called Mikey who was just, man, if talking about like someone who hadn't gone through puberty trying to tackle a guy who just like was a fully developed man, oh my God. Those are some miserable weekends.
Yeah, we had some big boys, that's for sure. But Pete, you finished, and then if I'm correct in my research, you went on to study. I forget the institution, but you went into sculpting, correct?
Yeah. So I finished high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was going to do either architecture, design, or become an artist and do sculpture at Sydney College of the Arts, which is like attached to Sydney Uni. Ended up going there thinking that art school was the way forward as a sculptor for some reason. But I think it's different when you're not an actor growing up and you can't just go up and play like, I'm definitely not an actor. I'm not a director who can also think about ever being an actor or ever was an actor. So for my outlet was to create things. So I was always like a builder. I would build things. I did like wood tech and stuff in high school. And so doing sculpture was like the next step of like going from building stuff in high school, like a fish tank cabinet, to making something a bit more artistic. And that became like a more sculptural kind of route. So then I did 4 years of that because I didn't really know what I wanted to do next, but I was kind of exploring, like looking back on it, exploring ideas of like conceptual frameworks and the idea of like what is art and what is,
how does someone create art? And I guess it's a very interesting perspective to come into filmmaking, because filmmaking is just like the ultimate art form. It has, you know, photography, it has film, it has sound, it has music, it has design, it has sculptures in it, you know, it has everything in it. It's the total art form. So I guess like if I was leaning towards a way that I had like complete control over the biggest amount of mediums, it would be moving towards filmmaking. But starting in sculpture, I think it's very, I did body casting. So it was a very kind of like meditative, single focus approach. I was casting my own body, like my arms and torso and head and stuff. So it kind of gave me a little time to think, and be a little time to kind of work out how to tell a very specific thing in a very specific idea in a solid form that wouldn't move. You know, you're just looking at like a sculpture. So thinking back on it now, I guess how that informed my filmmaking was that I was taking the similar frameworks of how do I tell the most, you know, specific idea in the most simplest form. And then if you put that into an art, into a filmmaking sense, I guess that's what I assume good writing is like, if you can make that seem real. But if the question's around like how does other art forms, like if Mike's doing jiu-jitsu and I've really gotten into like photography and stuff like that, other art forms and other interests will definitely influence your approach to the thing that you do the most, which is obviously, or professionally, which is filmmaking or acting. Like I'm sure, without knowing much about jiu-jitsu, I'm sure like the idea of like body control and the idea of how to, you know, execute and how to do stuff is a very obviously linked to how an actor would perform physically, and even the mental state and the breathing and stuff like that. Whereas a filmmaking coming from a sculptural sense, I think it's it definitely has those frameworks built into it of how do you tell an idea clearly, concisely, and effectively. I think.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I had a quick sneak peek at some of your sculptures, and it seemed to me that it had some, I want to say like, you know, ancient Greek Roman mythology a bit tied to it. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think I actually had a chat about this recently with someone I was talking about. So the sculptures I made were based around Greek myths, and as you can already tell, I'm leaning towards a more narrative-based style of sculpture work. So I take the idea of like a myth like Prometheus or Atlas, or Icarus, and I think all of us probably know in some sense what those stories are. And they're very kind of like concise, like, you know, like one paragraph kind of stories. And then how do I put myself into those, how I was feeling at the time, and then ended up, you know, making a bunch of body sculptures about myself, from myself, that were kind of linked to other materials like leads and concretes and other like kind of steel and stuff. And how do I then tell the story of those myths through my own body in a sculpture? Which is kind of what I'm still doing. I'm just not using sculpture anymore. I'm using filmmaking. But yeah, I think looking back at my work now, I realized that I was always kind of telling the idea of a story through the solo figure. And then as I got into something like, after doing sculpture, I went and did a master's in film studies at Sydney Uni. So I was learning about filmmaking and history, and wrote my first script. And it was the idea of like masculinity through one person. And then my first film was kind of about two people, and then eventually it becomes about like how do you represent two people as a society in a relationship or internally. And I think it's just a progression of me as a person realizing that I'm one person, I exist in a relationship, and I exist in society. And how does that progression track through my artwork or my art, my body of work? I think it's pretty clear when I look at it now, but I didn't know that at the time. I was kind of just exploring a different medium and finding a better way to say what I wanted to say. Right,
interesting. And I mean, I grew up on Roman and Greek mythology, and you know, my dad reading me the Iliad and the Aeneid for bedtime stories and things like that. Do you have any, you know, future ambitions of maybe, you know, transforming some of those stories into, you know, the film?
Moving into like a Greek mythology cinematic universe.
I don't know. Maybe,
yeah, I think it's there. I think they're all there. Like the stories are so known. It's like Shakespeare. The stories are so universal because it's all foundational, you know, human nature. It's like what's so great about those mythology stories are that they're very easily to break down in a moral sense because the messaging is so clear.
Yeah.
But the way it's told is specific and interesting. Like looking at Icarus, like flying too close to the sun, and the relationship with his father, and being told not to go too high, and then he goes so high that his wings melt and he falls to the sea. Like it's a pretty basic story when you think about it. It's about ambition and about how high can one person fly. I would argue they're in every story. It's just how it's told. Like, if anything, like Lost Boy could be an Icarus story. How far can you fly close to the sun in pushing yourself in a relationship, and how far can you go before you fall? Like, it's like Ben Oxenbold's the sun. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that's just what it is. But the idea that the idea that the stories are in there somewhere, I think, is inherent in storytelling, because that's where, if you think about the original story, that's probably where they came from.
Super sick. Can you say them? And Mike, how do you reckon I mean, if I'm correct in reading up on you, you have a very, very strong love for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How do you think that has transformed, or has it at all affected your acting ability?
Yeah, I think, oh man, like, P.S. Pete, I haven't seen your sculptures. I just realized.
They're hidden, they're buried. There's some.
Just Google, you'll find it. Sculpture.
Yeah, well, like, how did you find them?
I don't know. I was doing research on you both, and then I Googled Peter Skinner, and then it was.
So you actually found it on the internet?
Yeah, on the internet. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, I know what I'm doing after this.
People have bought my work before, which is kind of weird because my own body is sculpted. So people like own my work in their house. And actually, when I moved out of my parents' house, all my like overflow of other work I had to like destroy it. So I was like peeling apart wood sculptures and like wax sculptures and melting them down. It was like destroying a part of myself while I was moving out of my childhood home. Like, it was.
Whoa,
that is so meta.
That's like Toy Story 3.
Yeah, literally going into the furnace kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, man. Yeah, jiu-jitsu, firstly, I think it just gave me something to do. And I think, that's a I mean this, like, that's a dangerous thing as an actor. I think, early on, as a graduate, it's like, everything's kind of fun and games, but you kind of get around the 30 mark, and certainly this is what I've experienced, is just the deep reality of life starts to kick in, and people think about, what is actually important to them, and what they're spending their time and effort doing, and to not have a schedule, to not have a routine, that can be, quite a scary thing and a non-helpful thing. So yeah, definitely. It gave me something to do, but I'd had one or two experiences where I was kind of in a scenario or scenarios where I didn't quite. I just realized, like, actually, I don't really know how to use my body and handle myself in kind of, particular scenarios. And I remember, like, my second class, I was riding my motorbike and there was a bit of road rage going on, and someone pulled up like right next to me and was just kind of shouting at me. And I remember riding away from that going like, like, my heart's beating. I'm a little bit kind of nervous and shook about it, but like 1/10 of what I would be, probably because I was just so exhausted because I just finished training. But just what I'm trying to say here is that it got me out of my head and it got me into my body. And I think that was a very important thing. The other thing, and it's the reason why, when the UFC started in '93 and when, the age-old debate of, who could beat who, and the secret person in the Himalayan mountains and they're going to use their chi and touch of death. And it's like the world got a very, very big reality check in 93. And it was, well, if you take two unarmed people and put them in a cage, what is the most effective martial art? And it was very clearly jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu, there's no striking. I mean, jiu-jitsu literally means the gentle art. And they were trying to work out like why it works, and it works because it's got a system. So other martial arts have like moves, but jiu-jitsu has a system. Also, it's one of the only martial arts that you can go 100% in practice and walk away without a scratch and just be completely fine. Looking at that system, I think where this has really helped with my acting, it's like boil it down to its essence. It's like jiu-jitsu. Okay, well, you're trying to, protect and defend. And so in order to do that, you're trying to control and submit another human being. And then you can start to break apart jiu-jitsu into kind of like, the main kind of structures of what makes it work and what is that process. And okay, so you take the person to the ground, then you pass the legs, and then you work up a series of pins, and then you submit your opponent. And if at any point it doesn't work, you get to go back to that system. And I think that's where acting, where everything kind of started to get a bit more streamlined for me in terms of like why bother, man? Like, why bother acting? Like, we're playing dress ups. This is so ridiculous. Like, I'm an adult and people are paying me money to put on other people's clothes and like say these, it's completely ridiculous. But if I really think about like, okay, well, what's in it for me? Like, what I get to kind of create some meaning behind it. It's just always take it back to survival. And what do we need in order to survive? And what's the reason that, why are we still here as human beings? Is because we're able to connect with each other. Safety in numbers kind of thing.
Yeah.
But looking at that aspect, it's like, okay, well, what's a way of connecting with each other? And well, storytelling. It's how we've always done it. And to be able to share meaningful stories, what's a way of doing that? Well, you can write, you can direct, but certainly for me, acting has been the most appealing thing. And then breaking down acting from that point of view, it's like, well, what makes up acting? And I finished drama school. I had like 200, I had a list of like 200 things that if I got a role, I was like, this is all the stuff I need to work on. And I need to make sure. And within a few days I would burn out, and then I'd rock up on set and I'd be thinking about the 190 things that I didn't get done. And, whereas when I started to relook at it just from a streamlined point of view, it's like, what is actually important? What actually needs to get done? And it's like, well, just, breaking apart acting, it's like, well, there's a human being and they have a moment, and that's a scene. And it's like, okay, well, suddenly, there's a clarity here of what do I need to focus on? Well, I just need to build a human being, and then I just need to make them do something in order for them to have a moment. And then taking that into practice and going like, oh, maybe I don't need to do those 200 things which completely make me overwhelmed. Maybe I just need to do just a few things, but do them well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, okay, and in the sort of physical response, did you to your training in jiu-jitsu, do you think that helps in terms of your acting and being able to maybe manage your body a little bit better? Was it better for film or stage or?
I'm always sore now.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a kind of I think because I'm using all that kind of nervous, anxious energy up in training, I think being sore and being tired, that certainly helps me on set. You know, I'm nervous and scared enough as it is that, oh God, without exercise, without using my body in some way, I think I'd just be a wreck.
I can definitely relate with that. I mean, for me, some of the acclaimed best performances that I've done, according to friends and things like that, has purely been on 2 hours, 3 hours sleep, because I just don't fucking care anymore.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for you having all those like 200 lists of things that you had to really get through in terms of being from one of the most studying at the most prestigious drama school in Australia, in NIDA. Question for both of you, and maybe we can start off with Pete first. Like, I'm someone who hasn't chosen that path in terms of having a tertiary education towards my craft, and I think it's hindered me in some places, and then helped me advance in other places, right? Like anything, there's good and bad. But for you both, like Peter, you studied at AFTRS and Sydney Uni in doing film and sculpting as well. How do you think that prepared you for the better and for the worse?
I think there's obviously a huge debate, especially in filmmaking. Like, do you need to be a film student to be a filmmaker? Short answer is no. There is, if you have the drive to do it, if you have the resilience to do it, and if you have the ability to find opportunities out there, and they are out there, I think it would just be harder. Going to film school, it doesn't have to be AFTRS. AFTRS is obviously like a super selective top tier film school, but like there's like a million film schools you can go. There's online film schools. Like, I could run a film school and it would probably be as beneficial for learning. But it's like, what's great about going to a film school in my mind is like, you're surrounded by other people who are there to make films as well. You are surrounded by the environment of studios, cameras, gear, people that know how to use that gear. And you're also surrounded by, and not just the gear, you're surrounded by people who know how to use that gear and use it in a way that you don't know how to do. So like, if I was growing up through Waverley, which when I was there didn't even have like a film, like you couldn't even make a film. Like, like you'd be a painter, a photographer, or a sculptor in art, and that was about it. You could do ceramics maybe. But if I grew up, because my parents, like my dad's a flight attendant, my mom was a real estate agent, like I didn't know anyone in filmmaking. But if I grew up in a family of filmmakers and my friends were families of filmmakers, maybe then I could move forward and work with other people and learn from my parents and learn from friends and uncles and aunties and find a collective of people to make stuff. But if I'm doing it by myself, then that's hard. So film school finds that other people who are there as passionately as you are to do the same thing. Obviously having a name like NIDA or AFTRS or WAPA, VCA, like they're all schools that look good to people if you are from there. But it doesn't necessarily mean like you're a good filmmaker, because I can attest to saying that I went to AFTRS twice. The first time I left in 2012, I wasn't a good filmmaker. And then the second time I left in 2019, I was a better filmmaker. But if I had to answer that question succinctly, like, it's kind of the idea of like, I had somewhere to put all my eggs. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a person that I think I'm driven, but I'm also very easily distracted. So going to film school for 2 years to do a master's means that I could just spend the time doing that for 2 years and justify it to my friends, my family, my peers, my lack of work because I'm a student. It just finds a way to rationalize it and say that I can go and do it here. I can meet people, I can meet mentors, I can meet people that are going to help me become better. But everything I learn, I could learn elsewhere if I needed to. But like I said, it gives me a place to put my eggs, kind of thing, because like I needed that structure. But then the most I've ever learned was probably between the time leaving AFTRS the first time, 2013 I think it was, and going back in 2018. Like, I learned the most in that time, because I was self-driven to be like, I'm going to read, I'm going to learn, I'm going to become a better filmmaker, I'm going to put the work in. I don't have to be successful now. I'll be successful in 10 years if I do the work now. Film school is just another avenue to go down to become better. If you can find a way that's equally beneficial elsewhere and you have those connections already, then you don't need to go. But if you want to go to a place 9 to 5 every day that says, hey, you want to be a filmmaker, let's do the work, then you go to a school. But if you have a friend, I could turn to Mike and go, hey, Mike, we can start our own film school. I show up to your house every day and we sit down and we do the work. Like, and that's the same thing. But we limit ourselves on the idea of having, all the other people around us, technology, stuff like that. But film school is one of the only places in the world that probably care that you're making a film at this age, because they have to, you pay and they have to facilitate you to make a film, which that doesn't really happen in the real world. Like, you know what I mean? So that's another real way of being able to make something that you want to make if you know what you want to do. But I don't know, if I have to give advice about going to film school or not, I would say yes, go if you know why you're going. And if you're going for these reasons and you're happy to be led by the course, but also learn from the course while constantly reassessing what you're trying to get out of it. Like, you might not realize it at the time, but you'll learn something, but it can be learned anywhere, but it just depends if you have the resources.
Of course.
Long answer, sorry.
No, it's good. I think you definitely touched on a lot of what's right and what's wrong about it, because I think a lot of people, and certainly actors and directors, you can get very jealous of people who are just sort of born into the industry, right? And they're like, oh, you can go get a job and you'll be working on a $10 million feature film as a runner, and then you make connections and you're all good. But I think there's a lot of students and people out there that, like us, didn't sort of have that connection. And I definitely think relationships is the best thing that you can get from film school, and obviously you've got the time to really put in, and the excuses of like, oh no, I'm a student and da da da, so it's I'm working 9 to 5, and I think that's really cool. But I'd love to hear from Michael. How does your NIDA experience?
I can't say enough for what Pete said. I think just amen to all of that. My personal experience with drama school was, I was, as I said before, I went at 18, so I was very yes sir, no sir. And if I was to go back, or at least when I do look back at it and think about what would I have done differently, certainly I was given the opportunity every single day to practice I don't know how to say it. Practice not caring. And by that, I mean practice caring on what is truly important. I think I spent a bit too much of drama school caring about what the teachers were thinking and saying, and I think it was I went through a very, very old school system. My year was the last year to have the same kind of system that had been there for like 30 years. So it's very, very different school now. Just everything Pete said, I think is so valuable. With coming at it from the actor's point of view, there is this one little aspect where there is no other time in certainly in my life, but I think in a lot of actors' lives who go to drama school, where they are going to, for whatever, 2 to 4 years, rock up at the same time every single day to a space, to a quiet, big, open, private space where they will do, an hour and a half of voice, an hour and a half of movement, an hour of Alexander technique, have a little lunch break where they just have to learn lines for the next 4 hours of acting class or improv class or whatever. Go quickly, grab some food, and then do the production, the play for that night, and then go home and try and learn lines before the next day, but won't have enough time because blah 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 blah. But the point is that doing things because outside of drama school, I'm I still go to acting class. It's still a very normal thing for me. But what's not normal is waking up and doing an hour and a half of voice, an hour and a half of movement, an hour of Alexander technique. It's those kind of details where like, oh man, it's doing the boring bits every single day with that external accountability, you know, that teacher going, you know, up, down, blah, blah, blah. It's just this thing, like it gets put in your bone marrow, that I truly don't think I'd like. There's no other time in my life for 3 years I'm going to go do voice and movement and stuff. So that work, to put that kind of work in the body, is I do look back at that and go, oh man, like thank God I did do that, because I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah. Wicked. And interestingly, right, and you both learning a lot of skills from obviously your respective, you know, courses and crafts that you studied. But Michael, we'll start with you. What do you think is the most important and most overlooked skill to foster as an actor?
Self-awareness. Yeah, I think just that old Heath Ledger quote of you need to know yourself so you can use yourself. I think that's really important. I think the ability to do deep work as well, in that to be able to put a phone down, to be able to remove any kind of distractions, and actually practice, like actually get better at the craft. I think that is, man, that's a freaking skill. That is a hard thing to do, to set up a scenario with good coaches, good external accountability, a helpful environment, quiet, you know, no distractions, where we can just practice. I think that's really important. And there's this thing that certainly when I started to look at, you know, who were my heroes and who were their coaches, and seeking those coaches and working with them and seeing how, you know, what was the difference between like an $80 an hour coach versus the astronomical amounts that Oscar-winning coaches charge. But there were some really interesting factors in terms of inner child. It was a massive thing that just kept popping up. Was that there had to be this healthy integration of taking one's inner child into the adult life. I think that's because really, like, that's the only thing that makes me different to any. There's 1,000 fucking other actors out there, but bringing it back to a place where there's a kind of a currency, or like, what is the most kind of valuable currency I have? Well, I mean, the only thing that makes me me is bringing out that kind of inner child aspect. Sorry, the only thing that makes me different is that inner child aspect, and looking at it from like a very practical point of view. If you look at any of your heroes, I promise you there'll be 3 things that they do really fucking well. That they're able to release their shadow, as in their darkness, their fear. You know, they can just at any point just be a you know, a fucking monster and slam someone up against a wall. The other thing is they will be able to release their light. So their love, their joy, they'll be able to stand there and like they were when they were 4 years old, and just lovingly, you know, tears down the face, just joy and happiness. And there's those kind of extremes, and I think it's very much worth putting practice, time, effort into being able to hit those release easily those 2 points. But there's also this middle point of the ability to do nothing, the ability to simply breathe as oneself on stage or in front of the camera. And I think because that's a freaking hard thing to do, to sit there and do nothing, just breathe as yourself. But that is like the majority of what is going, your time, your effort and energy. The majority of it is going to be spent doing nothing. Just sit there and do nothing. And I think that's where the self-trust thing comes into play, because it's like, oh God, I haven't acted in a while, and you just kind of feel like, well, I'm here. I should do something right now. I should, when someone says action, I should act. And I think that's it's a pretty hard thing, but I think it's incredibly important to practice the ability to just sit there and do nothing. And yeah, for sure. And I love that. I gave you a bunch of answers. Sorry. Dude, I'm fucking loving this. Like, yeah, every answer you bring is great. And I love the point you talk about in terms of bringing out the inner child within the performances. And as definitely, as soon as you said that, I had like a little image of you in my mind from a excerpt in Lost Boy of like, you're sort of looking away from Ed. And then you sort of do this real childish look that was just so perfect nuance. And I was like, that was the point where I was like, okay, this guy's fucking legit. I got to say as well, I remember being in New York with the I won't mention who they were, the coach, but doing it for a number of years, and then almost this kind of like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, why would someone that's surely not important. Surely there's like kind of bigger secrets out there in terms of, how to act amazingly and blah, blah, blah. And I remember just that kind of reality check of like, man, I keep working with all these different kind of coaches who are really helping like the best actors out there, that certainly in my opinion, and like they're all talking about the same thing, like, oh, I just kind of got to be okay and fostering that inner child aspect. Like, what? I remember having a private session with someone, and I mean there was this I won't say who it is, but they were just like an obscenely famous actor who just kept on like sticking their head into my appointment, because they were like, trying to look at the coach being like, it's my time now. Because I get, everyone's paying so much for an hour with that person. But it was just like, oh yeah, like walking out of the session and just seeing the people who were behind me. It was like, man, like I think the point I'm trying to say is like, I was so skeptical. I was like, it can't be this simple. And I don't mean easy, but I just mean like, it can't be this simple. Like, yeah. Yeah, no, I get you. I get what you're saying. And, often it's the simple things done well are the hardest to do, right? But Peter, what do you think is the most important skill to foster as a director, and maybe, the most overlooked?
I've been sitting here this whole time listening to obviously what Mike's saying, which is spot on. I think I do a similar thing. Just I never knew it that way, how to phrase it that way, but the idea of bringing out like the inner child. And but yeah, to answer this question, I don't know. Like, it's, for me, it goes back to the idea of like people's perception of what, like, because as a director, like, I guess, Sidney Pollack, I think, says like, it's being able to realize the reality in behavior. So it's like, how does a director know if something's correct or not, or like real or not? Sorry. So then, like, you watch so many films, and as an audience, the audience has the best bullshit detector. I mean, an actor does something, or a director or a writer writes something or does something on screen, the audience is like, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. It's not like an intellectual thing. It's like a gut feeling of like, oh, that's real or that's not. So I think the important thing for a director, which isn't overlooked, but I think it's somehow inherently built into the person, but you can learn it, I think, if you practice it. It's the idea of just being able to realize what's real and what isn't. And I think the thing is, it's funny. I've got a lot of friends, and we all work in different industries. I think everyone would think they have an opinion on what a good film is, but I wouldn't have an opinion on what I think my friend's best, sales, scheme would be to sell something. You know what I mean? So I think it's something in art that everyone thinks they have an opinion, because everyone thinks they can rely on their own instinct and their own intuition and their own gut response to something. So then if everyone has an opinion on what's right and wrong, how does a director learn to be the best at that, but also see it and then mold the performance and the story and the script around those truths? So what I'm talking about, which what I'm getting at, is the idea of I think it's intuition. And I think people don't understand necessarily what intuition can be and what it is. Intuition, people think, is like a thing you're inherently born with, and you see it, you know it, and you do it. And there's something to that idea that you just as a gut reaction know something, but it's probably all based on your life of human interactions with other people and scenarios you've been in and how you think things work and things don't. But then how do you become a better filmmaker around that? Then it's just literally putting the work in. I think people say, oh, I don't prescribe to reading books about structure and writing, where it's well, no, you don't have to prescribe to one book, but you should read as many books as you can, because you're kind of feeding the beast, you're feeding the intuition. And then I think if you can build up your intuition, that you get to a point in your career where you're just making a choice which you believe is intuition, but it's actually just the accumulation of every kind of thing that you've studied and you've thought about and you've tried and you've tested and you've realized, hey, that works for me, that doesn't work for me. There's something telling me that works on a gut level, but I don't know why. But I think it's just the accumulation of time spent working on craft to realize that in the moment you can make the right choice. So I know there's an interview with Jonah Hill talking about why Martin Scorsese is the best director he's ever worked with. And it's I think, if I remember the quote correctly, it's he's amazing at, you take a really extremely hard problem, and then it's you're playing chess and you have to make the perfect chess move, and there's no clock and you have a limited time to make this chess move, but make the right move. You can make it in, you have 5 days to make the right chess move. So you think about every possible option, and then you finally make your move, and then you've thought, all right, 5 days is spent making that move, and that's the right move. He says Martin Scorsese is so great at that because he can make that exact move, but do it in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And that's what probably makes you a great chess player, that you can, in a certain amount of time, make the right move at the right time, thinking about every option on the board and what is going to be the best moving forward. I think it's the same for a director, because he says it in that respect in relation to a director. I think it's the idea of, that's intuition working. That's saying this is the right move, but it doesn't mean that it comes from some ethereal place that is unknown to how to get there. It's about learning and studying and trying. And the most overlooked thing, I think, is people want to be a director, but they don't put the work in. And I think it's probably the same with actors. People want to be an actor, but they don't put the work in.
Yeah.
It's you put the work in, you're feeding this idea of your intuition. And one day when it gets to the point where you have to make that right choice, you make the right choice. Not because you blessed by God to make the right choice. It's because you put the work in. So I think if it's one thing I would foster in a young actor or a young director or a young writer or myself or even established people that I know, they put the work in. And that's when that feeds the idea of, if the intuition is telling me what to do, that's not some voice in my head saying, do this and it will work out. It's the accumulation of all my experiences coming down to one decision that hopefully will be the right choice.
Yeah, that's interesting. Putting the work in. I think I was just trying to think of a visual metaphor for that. And I mean, your intuition's like the tip of an iceberg, right? Instead of you don't really know where it comes from, but it's only amassed by the amount of work that you put in, that that you've tried and tested, and really can only come up on the surface. And it might be this little tiny thing, I don't know how I fucking got it, let's just do it, fuck. But yeah, no, I definitely subscribe to that as well. But on a side note, right, recently I'd love to talk with you both and get your ideas on the way the film industry is sort of moving, in terms of how films are being made and how they're being cast more. Recently, I'm not sure if you guys have been following, but or I'm not sure if you heard of him, but Jake Paul has, are you familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
We know.
But yeah, he's this YouTuber that has gone from, just making YouTube videos to now fighting, some of the greatest fighters on planet Earth and beating them through his amass of followers that he's created through YouTube, and has sort of, skipped that. Like, he's got the money and the following to be able to make these fights, and the hard work and dedication to be able to actually put in the work and do the training over the time, and smart enough to pick the right fighters. But I mean, he's getting paid a lot, and is, at the moment, whether we like it or not, kind of, a very big face in boxing. And more recently, I'm not sure if you guys know, but there's this TikToker who, I forget her name, I got it in my notes here, Addison Rae, and she's got like 58 million followers or something like that. She just did a film with Netflix. Was one of the worst rated films. She's not an actor previously, like just sort of shaking her ass on TikTok. Not an actor previously, and Netflix did a film with her. Went horrible. A lot of people watched it, of course, because she has a lot of followers. But since then, she's signed like a 3-movie deal, with Netflix, guaranteeing her for 3 more and executive producing 1. How do you guys feel about the way movies are being casted, and the way producers are choosing to cast certain directors and actors? Do you think it's moving away from competence to, clout and followers and just, pure money driven decisions? Or, I don't know. I'm a bit curious to hear your interpretations.
It's interesting because Mike doesn't have social media. Ben Oxenbould doesn't have social media. The 2 biggest actors I've worked with in my last film don't have social media. So on a marketing sense, it would be great if Mike had 100,000 followers, because that's a built-in audience. But I guess, like, I don't know, I'm definitely a traditionalist when it comes to the idea of talent, and proven talent, and it's proven in the field they're in, and then they can apply that to films that they do. So I don't know, I'm not saying that it's tough, because it's like an industry problem. It's not really like an individual problem, because they're just establishing themselves, and they're finding a way through to cut through the bullshit in a market that's available to them. So when it's like, if you look at films like, big Hollywood blockbusters, they're becoming less and less original IP, because they don't want to take any risks. They don't want to not get a return. It's the same thing. It's like, if you're casting something that someone already has a built-in following, like you've already got audiences, and it kind of doesn't matter anymore if the films are good, because the money's spent on seeing it, and then you're going to have the diehard fans that are going to think it's amazing no matter what it is. Like, Mike's parents are going to think, and my parents are going to think what we do is probably always in some respect good. That's our built-in audience. Even if they probably don't think it's that great, they probably will still say, we're proud of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, like, it's tough, because I'm not against them doing that, but then is it pushing other people out who could do a better job? Probably. But then would the film get made if it didn't have them attached? No, it's such a balancing act. The problem with it is just the commercial sense of people wanting to make a return, and it's the safest bet to have people who have a following. But then, something like if Jake Paul went in and got knocked out the first second every fight, you'd be like, this is a big bullshit. Yeah. But then if you watch something like, I haven't seen the film with Addison Rae, but if she's good, then you're like, all right, yeah, that's all right. But if she's not, then it brings into question, is this the right way for the art form? No. But is it the right way for commerce? Yes. Does her ability then open up the space for other people who would be able to do the work? Probably not, because they don't have the followers that she does. But I don't know. It's hard, because I know in Screen Australia, and like, they look at how many followers certain people have when they come to casting and stuff, or production companies, or it's just the world we live in. And I guess if you're a purist to the art form of like, no, it's about art, not about money, then cast Michael Sheasby, because he hasn't got any followers.
Yeah.
There's something about them, because he does find, like, he has fans, you know what I mean? Like, they see the work, and I'm attracted to actors like that who don't have a following, because they speak with their work. But then that's not the world we live in these days, and we'll get past that maybe. But I don't know, I'm not really answering the question, but it's kind of it's a very tough topic because everything's based in money these days when it comes to making stuff, because everything's so expensive.
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely tough. Mike, what do you reckon?
I think it's nothing new. I think it's nothing different. I think this shit is always going on, and it always will go on. Why it's been more in my kind of field of view, I guess, is because I do watch a lot of like MMA and jiu-jitsu stuff on YouTube, so I had seen a fair bit of it. But you know, I mean, my sister would have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I think anyone can be marketed as the hottest thing in the world right now at this particular time. And I think there is a grace period where you only get I think the truth always comes out in the long run. And I think if I bring it back to what's important for me, and you know, what I value most, and which means that, yeah, so when I start looking at the long term, you know, that's what always kind of calms me down, because it's like, man, there's, you know, next month there's gonna be something about, you know, some social media person breaking through into some kind of world and being marketed as the hottest thing. It just always happens, and it's a short-term game, and so it kind of doesn't concern me. I mean, the story of how Nightingale got cast is just bloody fantastic, because you've got Jennifer Kent. I won't say the actress, but she could have had, you know, numero uno in this industry, and she could have had a $40 million film with that person, but she wanted who she wanted, and she cast, you know, Aisling Franciosi, who had one or two shows, but you know, nothing crazy. Yeah, I mean, Jen cast a whole bunch of I mean, there were a few. We had Damon Herriman, we had Sam Claflin, but when you look at the two main people in that film, they're you know, they're pretty much newbies, and that was like, from the producer's point of view, hey, they would have loved it if Jen was like, yeah, we'll go with the you know, the actress that's going to get me a $40 million budget as opposed to 13. But no, I want to cast who I want to cast, and look at the film that she made, and that's the film that went to Venice and Sundance and won the, you know, the jury prize. And I think it's about clarity of what game you're wanting to play. And I certainly have moments where I feel, you know, deeply insecure and afraid of, oh God, maybe I should, you know, should kind of do a bunch of stuff that I don't necessarily want to do, or I don't think is important. But when I bring it back to, hang on, like, what do I actually want to do? Like, what game am I wanting to play? And I think, you know, going back to me and Pete hanging out in 2015, sitting on a couch and, you know, just getting drunk and watching clips of our heroes and Paul Thomas Anderson and you know, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix and stuff, and sitting there, I think that was the connection of like, oh, we're playing the same game. Like we I mean, for me, I just want to do honest conversations on camera. Like, that's it. And it's super simple, and other people might find it so boring, and you know, their attention, they're more keen on kind of, I don't know, YouTube stars and that kind of stuff, and each to their own. But for me, what makes me feel like I can, you know, sleep at night, and what makes me feel calm is doing something that I think is meaningful to me.
Yeah.
So
interesting. And the meaningful work is definitely something that has been coming up for me a bit as well, and trying to actually really define that, because sometimes it can, I'm sure in both of your lives it can get easily construed with misconstrued, with people like, oh, you'd be great in this film, and like, it's a film about some ridiculous future where people are judged on their looks or whatever, but yeah, it's in terms of meaningful work, I sort of relate it to, what am I actually here to do? Like, what's the purpose of life? What do I want to really do? And for me, it's to really foster that self-awareness and explore relationships between humans, and really understand at an extremely deep level, and be able to really portray that to my fellow humans, and hopefully give them a better chance at understanding themselves a little better and forming better relationships with each other, which will in turn make the world a better place. But I guess my question is, from this, finishing off, I know it's been like almost 2 hours, guys, but
that's it.
So much. No, yeah, almost, yeah.
Whoa.
But,
Wow.
what's the purpose of life for you two, and the purpose of your work?
Do you want to go, Mike?
Peter and Michael. Sorry.
You go first, Mike.
Well, your question is the purpose of life. I think there is no purpose. I think there is no meaning. I think you got to make it up for yourself. If man, I'm sorry to do this. If you're saying what's like, for me, what's my purpose?
Yeah,
that is something that I write down every morning, and I feel very clear about. But it's certainly I won't say what it is, because that's my thing, and it's
so good. That's so good.
Oh, hello.
I lost you a little bit there. Yeah, I'll go back now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think the point is the heuristic rule behind it is that it's about contribution, and that the whole point is that there is a sacrifice to be made, and the sacrifice is that if I want there to be some kind of meaning, well then that means that I have to contribute by giving a piece of myself to the group, to the tribe, and that's a very fucking scary thing to do. So yeah,
I agree. I'm of a similar thought, I guess. Maybe it's why we work together so much. But the idea of, I don't know, it's find something that you love doing and you enjoy doing, and then use that to show other people that there's something else, some meaning somewhere. And if that allows you to find meaning in yourself, and one other person sees that, then it's kind of beneficial to everyone. If everyone's only two people, then that's still better than nothing. So I guess in the films that we make, and we're trying to explore anything, it's the idea that, you don't have to feel as lonely as maybe you feel when you're not doing what you do, that you love. And if you can find a way to express that with other people, and they can see that and feel that way, you feel better, and then they feel better. But it's, like Mike said, it's adding something.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And I definitely agree with you there, Mike, in it being scary, but fucking worthwhile, I guess, as well. What else are we gonna do?
It's gotta be scary. If like when you say on the right, like if you're not writing something that scares you, then you're kind of sitting in a safe zone, which isn't as interesting, or might not touch on things that you're unaware of at the time. That's the whole point. Against the path of most resistance is normally, the most beneficial.
Yeah, I heard a great quote the other day. I forgot who it was from, but fear is my guide.
Yeah.
So wherever I fear most, or wherever I'm fearing, is like, that's where I need to go the most. But Right. Thank you guys so much. This has been like 2 hours of the most wonderful conversation I've had in a while. I can't thank you enough. Is there anything you'd like to tease for upcoming projects and let the world know what you got going on next?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you, obviously, having us. I was very nervous about this, but it's kind of just, it's my first interview I've done with Mike, actually, together. And I thought we'd probably just be laughing the whole time.
I thought Pete would just be bagging me out for 2 hours.
Keep things held back. But no, I just finished writing my first feature, which is kind of an accumulation of all the work I've done previously. So I'm looking at hopefully doing that next year, which would be obviously amazing to get to do. I'm writing a longer form version of Lost Boy, so like a kind of 6 times 1 hour series. But yeah, I've been locked down, so I'm just thinking about something small I can make, and I might, the idea of just practicing and trying things like staring contest, which I'll send to you. Lando is like I just made that because I wanted to make something with 3 people in my living room, and then I don't know if the idea of if you just do something like that, you work on your craft, but also it might become something bigger than you thought it was. Now that's doing it's kind of like festival circuits and it's out in the world. So that's what I've been up to. What about you, Mike?
Not much, man. COVID's just been pretty much like whale watching, sitting out on the headland, saying hello to Pete's puppy. No, I've been trying to, I guess, put down some of my thoughts on paper. So I started doing a little bit of blogging here and there.
I've been an avid watcher and reader.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that, man. Oh, that's awesome.
I really enjoy it.
Well, you're the one person, so.
Well, it got sent to me by another acting mate, so I'm not just the one person.
Okay, cool. 2 people are reading my stuff. That makes me super happy, man.
Well, I read it as well when you tell me that I'm in it. So you
have 3 people, man.
3 at certain times.
Oh, dude, happy days.
I read all of it.
Yeah.
Wicked.
How about you? What are you doing next?
Oh, I mean, much like Mike, it's been fucking whale watching. But
Mike actually literally whale watches. He has like binoculars and stuff.
You got perfect setup.
It's a great metaphor as well.
What have I got going on? I'm editing a short film at the moment that I've shot a year ago and tearing my hair out about and sort of refiguring the whole thing at the moment. So that's been fun. And just auditioning, to be honest. Auditioning. Not much going on in Australia. So most of the auditioning work I've done has been through the US, but it's just sort of keep going. And I think after this conversation, I'm definitely going to focus a lot more on what you both have said, just sort of burying myself in the work and, just try and have a lot more fun with it, Yeah.
That's where it's at. Do the work and then you'll find ways to have fun with it.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, both of you. Really appreciate it. And I think that's it.
Cool.
Thanks, bro. Thanks for having us, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And we are